The Next Generation perfectly represents the gender roles. I mean, the whole show is basically the world's most skilled father on the planet who is just able to perfectly balance and bring together all the elements, who honors every single member of the team, just like constantly helps them work together. It is just a master class in family.
Hi, welcome to Jeremy Pryor's podcast, or what I like to call Jeremy Pryor Unfiltered. I'm his daughter and producer, Kelsey Gall, and we are excited to bring you seasons of content all the way from Tolkien to theology, from business to family. If you like to contemplate deep philosophical ideas across a wide range of topics, you've come to the right place. Make sure you give us a follow so you don't miss out on future episodes.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. I'm here with my lovely daughters, Elisa and Sydney. How you guys doing today?
Good. Great.
Yeah, quite a gloomy day. I'm sporting my introverted but willing to discuss theology mug that I received from Sydney. Thank you, Sydney.
You're welcome.
Very thoughtful Christmas present. So speaking of Christmas presents, one of my favorite Christmas presents of all time, Elisa gave me an entire sketchbook filled with some of my favorite characters that she drew. And so I've been constantly displaying different ones, and I am so happy every time I see that. So anyway, you guys are great gift givers. I appreciate it so much. All right, guys, we're going to have a couple conversations, maybe three. We'll see what we get to today. I want to start by trying to understand the fusion of identity that's occurring around people's sexual orientation. And I feel like as Christians, we're capitulating in some way to this. So it's so confusing right now. And so I'll play for you guys a quick video where this is uncovered a little bit. And I'd just love to get your thoughts about what to do about this. All right. So this is, share my screen. There he is. All right. All right. I'll play this video for you guys.
What do you think is the one thing that Christians don't fully comprehend when it comes to witnessing to the gay community?
Yeah, I think the one thing that Christians are missing is how the world has made this huge error. And it's not just they don't understand that this is sinful behavior. I believe even a bigger error is how the world and now Christians are conflating sexuality with personhood, where it's no longer, if you were asked someone who identifies as gay, whether they say they're Christian or not, you're asked them, what do you mean? They will not say, this is what I feel. They will not say, this is what I do. What they're going to say is, this is who I am. That word who reveals this huge error. Sexuality is not who you are, but how you are. And when Frank, how can we talk to someone that this is, or even have this discussion or try to convince someone that this is sinful behavior when they don't even view it as behavior? If you were to talk to me 25 years ago before my conversion, and you were to say, Frank, you were to tell me this is sin, I wouldn't hear you saying that, what you're saying is, what I'm doing is sin or my desire is sinful. I would hear you say that my whole person from head to toe is reprehensible to you and to God. Because I could not hate my sin without hating myself. Now that I know Christ, I can hate my sin without hating myself. And when there is this huge error, this confusion of making your desire who you are, you can't separate their sexuality from the person, which is why people get so offended. We say this is sin, and we think, I'm just calling this, that your behavior is sinful. Why are you taking it so personally? Because it is very personal for them. It is who they are. It is their person. So I think we need to understand that and how we got there. And I talk about from mid-1800s how we have made it our feelings, our desires, our experience part of who we are. Not only part, it has become almost completely who we are. That's why even gender, a self-perception, how I view myself. How does this self-perception all of a sudden become who you are? See, in the past, we could separate that. I could say, okay, I have these thoughts and my feelings, And I think and I realize that not every thought that I have is right or true or good. So therefore, I need to kind of put my thoughts and my feelings through a filter of truth. We've lost that today. You feel something, that's you. You think something, that's your truth.
Such a clear, and the question that he actually asked was, how do you evangelize to the LGBTQ plus community? And he started by just articulating this thing that's occurred, where identity and feelings have merged, and he's really saying you really almost can't share the gospel while they are in that particular frame. He doesn't really answer the question, okay, then what do you do next? That's kind of where I kind of got confused. I was like, oh my gosh, how do you, I think he really describes well the problem. Yeah. What does that start for you guys?
I mean, I think he's just totally right that it's so hard to call out the sin in their lives and in their behavior because they just don't think of it as a behavior. They think of it as their person, as who they are. So it's so hard. Like the first step is to separate the two before calling it out. And that seems so impossible with the way that they're so saturated in a community that's telling them that it is who they are.
Yeah.
It's hard to counteract the whole affirmations of an entire community. You being the one voice to suddenly come and say, no, that's actually not who you are. It's just a behavior. It's one very small aspect of who you are. And like the rest of who you are is like a creation of God and he wants you back and like all these things. Like it's so hard to get there when there's an entire community that is telling them otherwise.
Yeah.
So I think that there's just a huge detriment to us, the way that the things that they've been told all of their lives and what they think it means as soon as you become like sexually abnormal.
Yeah. That
like you're just completely different from everyone else, and then you need like tons of affirmation from this community. And then it's so hard to undo.
Yeah, it kind of locks you in. Lisa, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I was just thinking this could be one reason that people just think Christians hate gay, trans people. They just think, oh, they just hate them because that they're this way. But it's like, we don't hate them. We don't agree with what they're doing.
Yeah.
And so it's like, again, it's like their actions and their lifestyle, but it's not the person that we hate.
Right.
So I think that ties in with that as well.
This idea that your feelings are the clearest pathway to understanding your identity. I can't help but wonder how much of this has occurred because of the erosion of family-based identity. So I think that most people are just sort of floating around without an identity. And I don't think we're really meant to be in that situation. I mean, I think people are meant to be handed from the moment they're born. I mean, I think about like Elijah, my grandson, your nephew, when he came into our family, it was like so much identity was just, he can sort of sense it and feel it everywhere, right? That he's a part of something and we're blessing him on Shabbat. And it's like, you're a grandson in a family, a son in your family, you're coming into all of this identity, and we're speaking it over you, every week. And, I think for most people, I think a lot of parents today feel like that's actually wrong. Like you don't want to give your kids an identity because, as an individual, what do you know about, their identity? And so then the next thing that happens is that, kids are starting to, well, I don't know who I am. Like, where do I go to find this out? I don't know anything about my family in the past, my faith. Maybe I'm not raised in a strong faith community, so that's not providing any identity. I don't know what God thinks of me. And so you start to look for grounding for an identity. And then you have these, spontaneous feelings that are coming up from the depths of the inside. Where do they come from? I don't know. But all of a sudden I don't really necessarily feel like a normal man or a normal woman, or I have so you start looking for what's the most unique feeling that I can identify that is spontaneously and apparently authentically coming from the inside. Maybe that's the clue to tell me who I am, to finally answer this impossible question about my lack of identity. And so these feelings that come up, they then you attach to them and say, "Oh, I think that's who I am." And then of course, you're in a community, imagine being in middle school, and all of a sudden you see all of these other people who are suddenly finding themselves, like finding their identity, and then everyone's affirming them, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, yes, here's a whole pathway, here's a whole community." Now, you might not have those same feelings, but man, it would be nice if you did. And of course, then people at that age are incredibly susceptible to any suggestions, so it's not hard to see how this happens and how the social contagion would start. But I want to root it back to, it seems like it starts with the fact that people today are born without anyone telling them who they are in any sense, and I don't think we're meant to live in that way.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, because I think that the root of a lot of these people, like why they make it their entire personality, is because of what you said. Like they think that it is what makes them unique. They think it's what makes them special. And I see that so much with some of these internet personalities that just have such wacky genders, such wacky sexualities, that they have to literally make videos on defining, because it's so like undefined and so strange. Because they make all those content regarding that because it's what makes them special. Like they didn't think that they were special before, and now they are, now that they realize that they're demigender or whatever that means. I don't even know what that means. But they just find new ways to make themselves special because they just don't realize that they are anyway. And I think that's right. That's, if you are born with our belief system and in a strong family, then you will be infused with that from day one, that you are a special creation of God, that you have a purpose here on earth that you are going to continually discover, and that your family is going to be right there beside you and just always affirming you along the way. So yeah, the affirmation and the infusion of identity, when that is taken away, when that's lost, when that's not given to them, then they're going to be looking for it other places, and it's not going to turn out well.
Yeah. And I'm curious, Elisa, in your situation or in your experience, you know, you guys have deep feelings. And Elisa, you're a feeler. And so you have these like passions that come like artistic and, and so have you felt a tension between the feeling of like these deep feelings that come up, these deep passions, and this identity that's sort of been imposed upon you from our family and from our faith? How have you worked that out, especially in the context of a culture that is telling you that what's most authentically true about you is certainly not anything that your family or your faith could say, but you really need to like discover this for yourself and find this in your own sort of emotions that are coming up. Like, has that ever been tempting or confusing, or curious how you process that collision?
Yeah. So I think when it comes to peer pressure, there's a lot of when you're hanging around kids that aren't Christian and you talk about your family all the time, or like what your family does, they just really don't care. But if you're like, oh, I'm an artist, or I designed this, or I do this, or I do that, they're like, whoa, you're such a cool person because of the things that you do individually. So there's this individualistic mindset where you're like, I want to be super cool, so I'm going to get all these talents, all these hobbies because I want to be cool to other people. And I think when I'm around Christian people who want to have better families and they don't, and I talk about my family, like, your family is so cool. So it's like, but I enjoy getting more identity out of my family being cool, because they're like the people that, I'm with all the time, that stand behind me, that like, but if I lose some of my skill, if I start to making art people don't enjoy, then I lose my identity. And then it's like, wow, where do you go from there? And so getting identity from richer things that's not so fluid, that doesn't change all the time, that you could lose, I think is really for your mind. Even like I play like mind games all the time. Like if I lost the ability to use my hands or something like that, where would I be? What purpose would I find in life? And so it's like, if you find purpose in just like existing with your family, with God, like being like just an enjoyable person to be around, versus like all of my worth comes out of my skills, then, it's a different mindset. So it can be really depressing to think that people don't like me because like my skills aren't good enough or something versus where your roots are from.
Mm. Wow. That's really interesting. Yeah. Sydney, how about you? How have you processed that collision?
Yeah, I think I agree with Elisa where if we equate our identity and what makes us special to our skills and things that could pass away, um, I think that is not as everlasting. Um, which passage is it, Dad, that says that love is the greatest? Is it 1 Corinthians 13?
Mhm.
Yeah. So in 1 Corinthians 13, when it says like you could do these amazing things, you could prophesy, speak in the tongues of heaven and all these things, but it would be nothing if you don't love. Um, Without love, it's all nothing. And I feel like relationships and investing in especially family relationships, because those are the only ones that you're going to have like physical ties to your entire life. That is what is going to be the most worth it to invest in and to leave your legacy, leave your footprint in life. And I think that means a lot more than trying to get these skills or trying to um, form an identity of yourself in the world with anything else that will just pass away and no one will care about it in a few decades. And I think that is that short-term investment is what these people are going for. Like they don't really have any ideas for where they're going to be 50 years from now. Like we see that a lot with people that are trying to be young forever or like just wanting to leave their footprint in the here and now. And it's like 50 years from now, where will you be? You think that investing in a career for the next 10 years, 20 years is going to leave that footprint? Like the best way to leave the footprint is with relationships and leaving your love. I love the quote from Hamilton, the legacy is planting seeds in a garden you'll never get to see. And that is the best way to leave your footprint and to actually invest in something long term is to plant those seeds in the garden. You may not get to see them, but that is how you leave a legacy. So yeah, that's what I think. Like having the identity in something that is actually long term, like Elisa said, and that won't pass away if you lose the feeling in your hands and you can't make art anymore. Like
Yeah.
what we'll remember about Elisa is how loving she is and how generous she is and all these things, like not just for her skills and things that could pass away. So yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Don't go anywhere, Lisa. That sounded like a eulogy. We will remember you, Lisa. We will. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that has to be, yeah, it's implanted in the relationships that were closest in your life. And it's so sad that so many people are in such shallow relationships, you know? And I think about people who are forming communities in the LGBTQ or around any sort of hyper individual identity. And I think, Elise, what you pointed out that in some ways it's a little weird because a lot of your community and identity and the relational closeness is almost knitted to, an external behavior or skill set that's allowing you to have closeness with people. And that's sort of inherently really fragile compared to being in a family. So yeah, that's that really got me thinking. And this whole video, he's actually the question that Frank Turek is asking this man is how do you witness to somebody who's in that community? And he's pointing out the biggest obstacle, but he doesn't actually give a solution. I've been really trying to understand. I'm curious what you guys think. So imagine you are having a conversation with somebody who's very committed to, an identity that's based in their sexuality or their gender, maybe a trans person or somebody who is identifying as gay or non-binary or something else. And they found through that identity clarity about who they are, clarity about who their community is, that they didn't have close relationships with their family, but now they're close, their deepest experience of love and acceptance is coming from the community that they've now joined. And now you're having a conversation with them about the nature of reality and about who is God and about Jesus. And how do you then talk to somebody in that state? Let's say they are curious though. They're like, I'd love to hear about your faith and about your identity and about what you think is true. Any thoughts about how you would actually potentially reach somebody in that position?
Yeah, I think, well, it would start with me conveying how I don't believe that sexuality is an identity and all that stuff. Like I want them to be able to understand that I don't think of those as the same thing. So when I say I disagree with the lifestyle, I'm not saying I disagree with your entire existence as a person. I've seen so many videos of like arguments taking place or like debates taking place where the LGBTQ person's argument is literally, well, I exist. Like I'm here. I do exist. Like in contrary to what you believe, I do exist. And I think that's so funny because like that person never said that they don't exist, that person doesn't exist. They just said they disagree with the lifestyle. And so I think it's so important to get that out of the way at the beginning. It's like if I say I disagree with your lifestyle, I'm not saying I disagree with your entire personhood. Like that guy said, I think it is nice that he kind of talked about that. He didn't really follow it up with like advice on how to actually reach the person, but it is good to like start off with separating those two. And then I think that it would be useful to explain why God's design is best and why it looks out for both genders very thoroughly and lovingly. And the way that the world nowadays has completely skewed it, and why it doesn't work so well anymore because of us. Like that's because of us, because of divorce and all these things that men failing women, women failing men, like all these things, and like why the original design is the best design. That's probably why I would where I would go after that. And yeah, I feel like I haven't had a lot of these experiences. I haven't had a lot of these talks with people, usually because they're not super open to it and because they think if I disagree with anything, I'm disagreeing with their personhood. But the ones that I have had, they've been very like willing to listen and willing to hear me out, because their mindset is very like accepting, like, oh, I'm so glad that that lifestyle works for you. And I'm so glad that that faith works for you. And so that's a lot of the mindset that these people have. And so I think that if you really want to get effective, I don't think one conversation is going to completely transform them. I think that it's so important to show them what real love actually looks like. And it's not whatever they have concocted in their minds or whatever the community has told them love is. I think it's so valuable to show them what it really looks like, and that we don't need to talk about our sexual identities or our gender identities in order to get along and to have real relationships. Like that's not your entire identity. Let's talk about the other things that make us who we are. So yeah, I think that is probably the most effective way.
The Family Plan Calendar is the new way to keep your family team organized. Plan your rhythms, menu, household chores, and notes for the family all in one place. Visit familyteams.com to purchase.
That's good. Yeah, how about you, Lisa? Do you have anything you would add to that, or how would you approach somebody in this situation?
I agree with what Sydney said a little bit about like show through your actions a lot of like what it really means to love and be a Christian. Like when you're a real Christian, you're not like hating on them. You did bring up a good point. Like everything you said, I agree with. But one other thing that like I usually think about if I were to interact with somebody and they did ask me about my faith, I think that love and acceptance is very appealing to this generation. And no matter who you are, what you like, or what you do, I think like a lot of that's like their identity stems from that. Like they want to be in some group, and if they feel weird, they'll just go all the way and like join some weird group. But if you kind of, I think, pound in that God's love God's love and acceptance for who you are and who he made you to be, I think allows freedom to just be who you are. I don't think people are queer. I think that they choose that because it's a appealing lifestyle, because so many people are like accepting them. There's a whole community. There's not a whole community of Christians being like, God loves you. No, like he wants you to be who who made you to be. Like, this is who like God made you to be, and we want to help you be that way. So I think that for the majority of that community, they're choosing that. And so just to encourage God's like real love and real acceptance and how he wants to help you through any problems that you have or any questions or like conundrums in your head and your brain and your heart, like whatever you're feeling, whatever you like, want to identify as, like just showing that as like unconditional love and acceptance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like there has to be an experience of community, that you're describing, Lisa. It's like if you're, it's so you can, it's almost like these two parallel paths. You have to speak the truth and help them understand this distinction about identity and like you know, this is not a hatred towards you. The story is that we all are sinners. There's all kinds of things about my behavior, my sin, that I don't like and that I'm trying to overcome. We are trying to move towards a different place, and it's important that they hear those truths, and then in parallel with that, to also experience that love from people. Because what's not going to work for anyone is give up your whole community and then join this faith and try to follow God as an individual all by yourself. And so you're not going to have an experience of community or love or identity that you're going to get from this place. It's not immersive. It's, you know, we'll see you once a week and preach at you, and then you know that's going to replace the immersive community that you're now a part of. So this is I think a huge problem with our evangelism is that the other side of that conversation. There's a great book, Rosario Butterfield wrote a book, something like, you know, the gospel comes with a house key. And she basically describes as somebody who was identifying as a lesbian, and she was a gender studies professor. She was being really challenged by this pastor and his wife about her beliefs, but it was always in the context of being enfolded into their home, and feeling like she was a part of their community, and this acceptance and love that she was getting was coming along with this heavy dose of truth that was very difficult for her to accept. But she really says that it had to be both. I had to experience both. It couldn't just have been like, drop the truth on me and then I'm going to repent and live a totally isolated life now. So it's a real challenge to figure out how to create the kind of community that's going to be that invitational and that open for those who might be considering the truth of the gospel. So, all right, guys. Well, I want to also talk about a different topic here. So, our family has a relationship with Barnes and Noble that goes way back. You know, all the way back to, of course, when you guys were little kids, very little. We would take you constantly to various Barnes and Nobles. We would go on RV trips and we would look for Barnes and Nobles, and we would all buy books, and then we would, you know, be off on our next adventure with loaded down with all these books. And so, and now to this day, even though we're not going on lots of trips, RV trips anymore, it seems like there's still a Barnes and Noble rhythm, right? That you guys are doing. What does that look like in your life right now?
Usually every Wednesday morning we go to Barnes and Noble to do schoolwork, and I usually buy a few books,
Yes.
a few or 10. Don't call me out.
Yeah. All right. So something's happening at Barnes and Noble. I don't know if you guys know this. There was a takeover by, I think it was either bought out. And so there's a woman that was describing the history and what they're trying to do to try to restore Barnes and Noble. So I want to get your guys' take on what's happening over there, since it's very important to our family what's happening. Let's try to understand this, get your guys' reaction.
A Barnes and Noble never felt like your local independent bookstore, but James Daunt wanted it to. So the strategy was no small feat to change the way these stores both looked and operated. Because problem number one, their CEO hated the way the stores looked. I have seen him use some very colorful language to describe the existing stores in all of my research for this video. He's called them boring, unengaging, ugly, and dispirited. And honestly, I have to agree. That green color that has dominated Barnes & Noble locations for as long as I can remember, I swear you can smell that green, like dust and mothballs. In the newer stores that they're opening and the ones that are getting remodels, all of the color choices are lighter and brighter, from the paint colors to the color of the wood of the bookshelves. A lot of stores moved from those massive box stores to smaller locations nearby, so it felt more intimate. And then the design of the interior changed as well. James Daunt wanted to focus on smaller tables, wider aisles, creating a layout that felt more like a maze, anything to make it more comfortable for you to stay a while and explore for new books. And as customers are poking around their new and improved Barnes & Noble, they may also notice that the books on offer appear to be a lot different. And that's because James Daunt made a very bold choice to hand over control of the inventory to the management of the individual stores. Previously, that was determined by corporate. But James Daunt knows that good booksellers, good bookstore managers, should have a finger on the pulse of who their customers are, what they want, what are the local interests in the area, what are their customers buying the most of. They should be the ones to choose what goes on the bookshelves. So he's allowing them to do that. He handed over the daunting task of letting them figure out what to order and where in the bookstore to place it. No more planograms, no more algorithms, just booksellers selling books. I've seen James Daunt call this the liberating of stores, and it really does feel that way. By doing this, they're allowing each individual location to function more like an indie that has a lot more of a local focus. And because they're taking so much feedback from their booksellers, many of whom are book-loving social media users, they're able to keep up way more with what's trendy, what books people want to get their hands on right this moment, what books are trending online. They can do that so much faster than if someone in corporate were in charge. There are two more small pieces to this overall strategy puzzle. One of them is de-emphasizing sidelines, or all of those items for sale in a bookstore that aren't books. As I said earlier, that had gotten pretty out of control in Barnes & Noble locations before, and now they're starting to rein it back in. And the other thing is something they're not doing anymore. They have completely ceased taking money from publishers to place books in a Barnes & Noble store in a specific highly visible location. Barnes & Noble earned a lot of revenue from publishers to do that in the past, but James Daunt says that that's leading to the kind of uniformity that he's desperately trying to get away from now in Barnes & Noble stores.
Right. So big changes going on. Now, this is a beloved store for our family. And for those of you guys who are listening to this, we really, it does feel like almost like a theme park, the way our family treats Barnes & Noble. A theme park that has inspired, I think, so much of, your guys' love for reading and this and the we have the desire we have for books. I think a lot of families could really get to experience that as well. I think having a really good bookstore that your family has great memories around and gets immersed in, and so watching this video, I was really curious how you guys would react to this. So both like how you would describe the impact Barnes & Noble has had in our family culture, and how do you feel about the change that James Daunt is he's the new CEO, and he really helped revive failing bookstore chain in Europe, and now he's coming across the pond to help us out. So I'll let you start, Sydney, because I'm sure you have some opinions.
I kind of want to know what his plans are for the kids sections, if he's gonna let them be or not, because those were so great when we were little. Like even while past when I became a teenager, I kept visiting the kids sections because they were so fun, and they had such great memories, and they're so colorful, and they sometimes had little games out, like the trains or something. Um So I hope that they're not getting rid of the kids sections. There is one Barnes& Noble that opened like 25 minutes from us that looks a lot more like how she's describing. Like, they don't have the green. It looks very new and modern. It's like the bookshelves are like a maze and like it's wide open and stuff. Um and there are some things I like about it and some things that I don't, because it does make it easier to browse and like look around and stuff, but it makes it harder to be there with like your family and like there's no seating areas or anything. It's like basically just for browsing and then buying your books and leaving. Um so that part isn't great because I love going to bookstores and just like staying there in the environment because I love just being around books. And so it's so fun to just go and be around there and um looking at all the bookshelves and all of that. And the displays do look pretty cool. Like I think it is a good idea for the individual branches to know what their community likes and the kinds of things that are ordered more, the kinds of things that kinds of genres that are loved more in that area. I think that does make sense. Yeah, I'm just wondering like what kinds of culture changes that will create because Barnes& Noble used to look so like rustic or just like homey and cozy, and now it's like a little more modern, and I wonder if the cozy vibe is going to be decreasing in favor of it being more trendy. So yeah, that's my concern. I'm not like super upset about it, but yeah, from what I've seen, I just wonder if it's going to just veer off from the typical bookstore vibe and more of like a retail store.
Yeah. In and out. Yeah. Lisa, what are your thoughts and how have you experienced this as a part of our family's culture?
Yeah, well, I am not a huge fan of like sitting and reading for several hours or anything, or maybe for several hours and I'll get through like 5 pages if I get distracted. But like when I would go in there, I'd run like for the toys and the coloring books and the picture books. Like I was in the kids section until I was like 14 because there's a lot of like really pretty stuff there. And I recently got into collecting like folklore and fairy tales and myths and legends and things like that. And so I explored more of Barnes and Noble every time we go. And they have started doing this thing where I don't know like where or why or how, but like they've just recovered all like a lot of their books. It's like special editions, something like that. They're so aesthetically pleasing. And like they're like I bought a lot. They're like leather with really pretty designs on them, with really like fairy tale art. Like when you open like the two cover pages, they're like a really pretty art. And it's just been a lot more like I feel like they got like paper books or like hardcover even. They're just like kind of whatever, like something you give to the library. But they're just become a lot more like valuable or something. I don't know.
That's
Because they're
cool.
just a lot more like substantial. And then yeah, we went to that new location and it was very exciting because it was their sections were so beautifully laid out, and then they have all those new looking books. I would say old looking because they're all like leather and stuff, but they're like all yeah, they're all new, and there's like this whole section that's so beautifully laid out with for like home farming and home plants, and then there's one that's all like fashion and stuff. So I was just like going through it, super easy to like look and see, and then there was kids and young adults, and so it's kind of like everybody in the family has like if they have an interest, they just go off to their own section. But it is nice to be able to regroup, and like they usually have a Starbucks at their locations and things like that, where it makes a more fun outing. But they have done away with that with this one that we went to, which I agree is kind of like a shopping individual, like go run, grab a book, go home. So that's kind of sad. And like we all went through their backpack, like ready to sit down, and there was nowhere to sit. So I do enjoy how much more of the like bright sections there are. Very appealing, but there is less of a like chill atmosphere.
Yeah.
Have you ever considered starting a family business so you can spend more time working as a family team? We've started a year-long coaching program called Family Inc., where you get weekly coaching with Jeremy, access to our video training for launching family businesses, and lots of ideas for businesses to start that are working for other family teams. Head over to familyteams.com and click Family Inc. to learn more, or to set up a strategy call with Jeremy to see if this might be a good fit for you.
I think it's so important for families to have third places like this. One of the reasons why I wanted to kind of bring it up. Barnes& Noble really functioned like that for our family and continues to for over the last 20 plus years. And I think it does something to your kids to have this recurring experience of a bookstore. I definitely have very mixed feelings about this as well. I mean, I love the kids sections, the coziness, the sitting down, the grab a book, talk about a book, grab a cup of coffee, be there for hours and hours, which doesn't seem possible with these smaller, more trendy bookstore. So while you still can, you guys have a Barnes& Noble near you and your family, and you want to create a book culture, story culture in your home, I can't recommend enough a weekly trip to Barnes& Noble and just make it like an awesome experience for you and your kids. All right, speaking of our family culture, one last thing I want to talk to you guys about before I let you go. We watch a TV show during a media night that I grew up with in the 90s called Star Trek: The Next Generation. And what is it, like something 7 different seasons? And one of you want to describe what our family's current rhythm is, how we consume that content, what our rules are around this show?
Yeah, sure. So we have a family media night once a week. Right now it's on Wednesday nights. And what we love this show, and we love to just like rewatch it as like a whole experience for our family. And so what we do is we start a season every year. So even if we finish it like halfway through the year, we won't start the next one until the next year. It kind of like resets our memories and gives us kind of a new way to watch it. And I actually was talking to somebody about this, and she was asking me like, do people come back? Does Kelsey come back and Jackson come back just for this? And like, no, but we all have memories of that when we were younger. We all watched it together, and now we're kind of reliving it. Whoever's in the house, we all come for media night, and it's super fun. It's super nerdy. It's really fun. But yeah, we all geek out over Star Trek, and even when we were kids, we had a playroom upstairs where we set it up as the bridge. We had this like play guitar set that was like a wharf station, a battle station, and then like we had the captain's chair, and then we had the ensign's chairs and like the navigator's sections, and we would just play up there like we were on the bridge. So yeah, it was really, really fun.
That's awesome. Well, I want to describe why I'm a fan of the show. Besides the fact that we're nerdy and we like sci-fi fantasy stuff, that's given. But there's another reason that it's so difficult to find modern shows that are anything like a show like this. So I'll put on the screen, those of you guys watching, a poster of all the characters. Now, the thing that I think is happening is that what a lot of people don't realize is that shows like this, especially serial shows where you're getting to know the characters over a long period of time, and I think this is especially true of a show like The Office, is that what's actually happening is that the reason why these shows are popular, the ones that really get popular, that make people feel cozy, make them want to just rewatch it, that will make them want to put it in the background and almost live inside of it. What's happening, I think, in most of those cases is that the show itself represents a family. And so and the reason why it's so important that it be an office or it be a starship and it not be a family is that if it was an actual literal family, it's too triggering. I think that what happens is your subconscious is able to really play out sort of the life of a family a lot easier when it's not in the context of a family where a mother is actually a mother and you're like, oh, too much like my mother or too different than my mother. It's much more helpful. And this is why I think fantasy is so popular. It's much more helpful to have the actual family be a non-family but that represents archetypally the elements of the family. So if you look at this picture here, obviously Picard is like the father, and Riker, he literally calls him number one. So he represents sort of like the firstborn son of the family. And then you have the empath, which is Deanna Troy, who's clearly representing the mother, who is constantly processing everyone's feelings. You have the Beverly Crusher, who's the doctor, who really represents kind of another aspect of motherhood, really the aspect that is, more physically caring. So you have the emotionally caring mother, the physical caring mother, and then they brought Guinan in as sort of like the third archetypal mother who really is the intuitive mother. So she's got these incredible intuitions. She could just sense when things are going wrong. And then of course you have the rest of the cast, who are very much like, the rest of the family members and their unique giftings and how they work as a team constantly to solve problems. And it's a fascinating way. You got Wesley Crusher, who's like very much like a son of the captain, in the way that they describe. And so there's a very much a father figure, father son. So it is such a good depiction of family life. And I really think it's important for people to understand why we desperately need these. Now, what you'll find today is that you'll never be able to have a show where the two people in charge are both male. That's why, of course, when they came out with Voyager, if you got, that just considered sexist in our culture. You desperately want to make the leader a female. And if you do have a male leader, you definitely want to make sure that the second in command is a female. And one of the things that I find so interesting about Star Trek: The Next Generation, it was just before propaganda took over Hollywood, like literally like on the cusp. The very next shows all have a overt attempt to reverse gender roles from a traditional family context, whereas the Next Generation perfectly represents the gender roles. And so there's no hint of propaganda in the show because of that, because it pre-existed those efforts by the culture and especially by the creative culture. So it's very easy to really see the elements of the family, and every single episode is essentially a family team trying to solve usually a moral and physical dilemma, usually a couple storylines that are being interwoven, and you're watching really good fatherhood. I mean, the whole show is basically the world's most skilled father on the planet who is just like, able to perfectly balance and bring together all the elements, who honors every single member of the team, honors the maternal, honors the paternal, honors the sons, honors the daughters, just like constantly helps them work together. It is just a master class in family, even though there are basically no families, like there are no husband, wife, couples with children that are part of the main cast, which again is really good, because if there were, the whole thing would be too overt and too triggering and too literal. Like you needed to be abstract to actually enter your subconscious mind and allow you to just enjoy what good family life was always designed to be like. And I think even the experience of somebody like Riker, the the first officer, or the other sons, Data and Geordi and Worf, and what they represent in the story, they're adults. And this is what I crave more than anything else, is stories that show me how an adult family can work together in an appropriate way, solve problems and stay peaceful, where everyone is feeling fully released in their unique giftings. And is that helpful and interesting for 7 seasons? It's like amazing. So I just want to like kind of articulate why I think this is such a valuable show, and why, our family has been so into it for so long, to the extent that we actually have to ration the amount we watch it. And I didn't know why. Honestly, I was like, I decided just to take a step back and just ask this question: why are we so into this? I didn't know why. I just know we've been into it for like over a decade. And it's nostalgic for me because I watched this with my parents when I was growing up. But then I was like, oh, I think I know what's going on here. It really was. Listened to this amazing podcast series on The Office, the oral history of The Office, which is on Spotify. And they really articulate that this is why The Office is so popular. It's a family, but it's a family couched in an office so that it allows people to experience family through their subconscious and not directly and literally, which is can be really painful and frustrating and annoying. And it's much easier to do it abstractly and sort of in this sort of secondary way. And I was like, oh, that's exactly what's going on with Star Trek, The Next Generation. But yeah, does that, what are your guys' thoughts? Does that stir up anything for you guys as you think about our years and years of watching this show together?
Yeah, there is something so special about watching the growth of a particular set of characters through a long period of time. Um, Especially when like we were watching it when we were developing too. And so it just became like part of our childhoods is like watching these people develop as well. And they are all adults, but they're all on their own journey of discovering something. Like Data is like all of our favorite characters. And I think part of it is because he's like on this constant journey of discovery and like he's like always trying to meet this goal. He's an android, but he wants to be human and he's always figuring out something about humanity and like trying to understand it. He's like very analytical because he's a robot. And so he's just like, why do humans do this? Why do they do this? And so it's very like it's almost like a child in that respect. And so he's just very interesting to watch and see, like, what he comes up with and what he discovers because he's also brilliant, and, so seeing characters like that and the character arc that he went through, I'm not gonna spoil it, but, like, the what he went through is just so it's like, it can hit you emotionally so much more when you, like, actually watch it all through and you know who what all these dynamics are like, um and, like, how each of them, like you said, Dad, kinda, like, represents some archetype and what it's like for when all of those archetypes interact. I can watch that again and again, like, that type of thing, like, I do it with books a lot where there will be, like, a long series and it's like, there's a big set of characters and then they're all going through this thing together and then they all go through their own developments, but they're also all, like, interacting and, like, working together and it's kind of like Lord of the Rings, like, kind of that thing where it's just a group of people, they're all different, and they're all, like, working towards the same goal, and they're gonna be doing different things, but it's all working towards this thing, and that is so satisfying, and like, really makes you emotionally attached, and that's a good point that you say, like, sometimes it's better to make it all symbolic of a family, instead of just overtly a family, because then it feels a little bit too, like, unrelatable.
Right.
And to like, well, if this is about a family and my family's not like that, then it's not gonna apply to me. But if you make it more abstract if you make it abstract, then your brain, it feels like it gives your brain more permission to
Yes.
apply it in a bunch of different ways. Like, oh, Beverly Crusher's like this or like this. She's like a medic, but she's also a mom, but she could also be like an older sibling, like an older sister, and like, that kind of thing where you can just like put it into a lot of symbols because she's not overtly
Yeah.
the mom.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a really good point. And yeah, that show means a lot to us.
Yeah. Lisa, what about you?
Yeah, I love the characters, for that reason. I never really thought about it before that way, but, like, whenever there's a big problem, um, and, like, Picard is in control, I'm like, "Okay, fine. We're not reacting much to this." And it's, like, the wisdom and the
Yeah.
security that father gives when they just know everything. So then they, like I think men are shamed for that now.
Right.
Just knowing the solutions to problems and giving them out in a very, like, kind way. And so, like, for Picard, he's so calm and he handles things very well, and, I just love that, just, like, knowing that everything's gonna be okay because he's in control. And, yeah, and then, like, Data, just always so inquisitive, it's so interesting to watch his, like, growth and even how he's, like, understanding humanity. Um Even though he's like a robot, like how can he understand that? But he kinda is grasping it and yeah, watching watching each character, like one of my personal favorites is Deanna Troy, how she's like just embodies that kind of like emotional stability for a lot of people, even though she seems to be, and if it's an episode about her, she's in the most emotional distress. But she's like very like the person people like come to for that kind of thing. And then even the doctor, like she's a very calm, stable, like the person you go to when you're physically hurt. And how she knows how to fix those kinds of problems is very comforting. And so like the different aspects of that, like as a mother, it's like Deanna needs to be taken care of, but she also like will help you. And then like there's a stable like I'm gonna protect you from like the like mama bear from Dr. Crusher, and then there's this strong father. And yeah, I don't have much with like the men. I'm sure that's more like impactful for young men becoming, you know, like just the son aspect of that. It's more impactful for them. But yeah, so I always loved the dynamics with the women and then like the father and everything. So I had in my senior year, I took this amazing class that was like basically English, but like deeper than English, in literature and stuff. And there was a lesson where the teacher was trying to come up with how to describe ethos, logos, and pathos, which are like the three um how would you describe them? Like the three appeals in literature. That's like ethos is the appeal to, like what's it called? Um, just like knowing things, like I'm blanking on the word, but just like knowing things really well
Yeah.
and being like really like knowledgeable on a topic. And then pathos is more of the appeal to um emotion, and then logos is more an appeal to logic. And he had Star Trek characters for each one, and it made me remember them so much better, because for ethos, it was Picard because he's just so, like, knowledgeable and so, like, he just has all of the credentials and, he's very trustworthy. And then pathos was Worf because he always appealed to, like, loyalty and the heart of a warrior and, like, all these things that were very, like, emotional. And then Logos was Data because he would always, like, come up with the logical conclusion to things and stuff. And so it just goes to show, like, how when you make symbols more abstract, how you can just, like, fit them in
Yes.
so many different places and use them and so many different metaphors and stuff.
Yeah.
So, that was memorable for me.
That's really good. Well, part of what I want to just articulate for you guys and just whoever's listening is how much we've lost through the decision to insist that fiction serve propaganda purposes. It's been devastating to the arts and to storytelling. We don't understand that people are still endlessly confused about what happens when you do like what happened to Star Wars. When they just destroyed Star Wars with that final trilogy by bold face propaganda. Every character had to be inverted. Um, it's so unfortunate, so destructive. And so, with what Star Trek, The Next Generation represents so well, it is sort of father knows best for the 1990s. And we could be pumping out so many helpful stories to help people understand what it would be like to build um, strong families. But instead, we are desperately trying to destroy family archetypes in order to free the individual from the shackles of those expectations. And how's that working out for us? This has been just devastating to our culture. And I think I just want to start calling it out overtly and say, that is not helping. That is hurting all of us. And we can point back to times where they weren't trying to do anything overtly propagandistic with Star Trek Next Generation. Nobody was sitting down saying, "Okay, guys, we got to protect the family, so we're going to create this show called." No, they just tried to represent reality, and in reality, and that they were trying to represent our ideal reality. That was sort of Gene Roddenberry's whole vision was, I want to actually try to represent the ideal, and so he was very insistent on that, especially with this after the original Star Trek. He really wanted to do that with the Next Generation, and they did a really good job with it. I mean, there's the of and he wasn't, I think he was an atheist. He was not your typical conservative, religious person at all. But just trying to represent reality, you end up with these characters that represent things that are really helpful, both on the archetypal level and then at the individual episode level. The morality is the gospel every single episode. Look for the gospel. It's always in there. It's amazing because every good story is really a moral tale about the gospel. And when you try to say, we're going to try really hard to destroy Christian morality and create, Game of Thrones, or we're going to destroy traditional archetypes and create, like the new Snow White or almost any show that you see that does this. And it's such a loss when people are trying to create overt propaganda. And people can sense it, and they are not going to become huge fans of propaganda. And so we need to be thoughtful about that. So I think just calling that out overtly and saying, good job with this show. I wish there were many more like it that were maybe made more recently, but it's been difficult to find. And but this is one that I can definitely recommend for families to get into, if as long as you can get over the sci-fi, the Klingons and everything else like that. But if you get your kids into it young enough, they'll be able to get past that. So awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me today.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. This is
Sorry.
good.
Thank you for listening to Jeremy Pryor's podcast. Make sure you hit that follow button so you don't miss out on any future content. Follow Jeremy on Twitter and Instagram, as well as his Substack blog, all linked in the description. See you next time.